The story that you are about to hear is a compilation of documented true facts, featuring characters, events, or places that has played a role in shaping history. Please sit back and listen as I recite this narrative for you. June and Jennifer Gibbons were twins born in Barbados to Barbadian immigrants Gloria and Aubrey Gibbons and raised in Wales, England. The Gibbons sisters, dubbed the Silent Twins, spoke only to one another and occasionally to their younger sister in a rapid-fire style of language that only they understood. The twins were born on April 11, 1963, and were part of the neighborhood's only black family. From infancy, the girls stayed mostly to themselves, mirroring each other's movements. Being the only black children in their elementary school made them the target of constant bullying, which increased their reliance on one another. As the bullying became more severe, school officials began releasing the girls early in the hopes that they would be able to sneak out and avoid being harassed. By the time the girls reached the age of adolescence, their language had become unintelligible to anyone else. They had also developed other peculiarities, such as refusing to communicate with almost any outsider, refusing to read or write in school, and mirroring each other's actions. During a yearly school-sanctioned health check in 1974, a medic named John Reese noticed the girls' strange behavior. The twins were unusually non-reactive to vaccination, according to Reese. He described their behavior as doll-like and immediately notified the school's headmaster. When the headmaster dismissed him, noting that the girls were not particularly troubled, Reese notified a child psychologist who immediately insisted on enrolling the girls in therapy. Despite seeing a number of psychotherapists, psychiatrists, and psychologists, the girls remained a mystery and refused to speak to anyone else. Anne Treherne, a speech therapist, met with the two girls in February 1977. While refusing to speak in Treherne's presence, the two agreed to have their conversations recorded if they were left alone. Treherne had the impression that June wanted to talk to her but was restrained by Jennifer. Jennifer sat there with an expressionless gaze, but I felt her power, Treherne later said. My mind wandered to the possibility that June was possessed by her twin. The decision was eventually made to separate the Silent Twins and send the girls to separate boarding schools. The hope was that once the girls were on their own and had developed a sense of self, they would break out of their shells and begin to communicate with the outside world. The experiment was clearly a failure from the start. Instead of branching out, June and Jennifer Gibbons withdrew completely into themselves, becoming almost catatonic. It took two people to get June out of bed at one point during their separation, after which she was simply propped against a wall, her body stiff and heavy as a corpse. When the twins were reunited, they clung even tighter to one another and became even more isolated from the rest of the world. They no longer spoke to their parents and only communicated with them through letters. June and Jennifer Gibbons spent their time in their bedroom playing with dolls, creating many plays and stories in a soap opera style, and reading some of them aloud on tape as gifts for their sister Rose, whom by this time was the only recipient of communication in the family. After receiving a pair of diaries for Christmas, the Silent Twins began writing down their plays and fantasies and discovered a love for creative writing. When the twins were 16, they enrolled in a mail-order writing course and began pooling their meager financial resources to publish their stories through vanity presses. The girls began teaching themselves how to write short romance novels with racy themes in 1979, when they were in their late teens. Although they had some success independently publishing them, their writing careers did not take off. While the story of two young women who avoid the outside world and retreat together to focus on writing sounds like the ideal environment for creating the next great novel, this was not the case for the Silent Twins. Their self-published novels' themes were as strange and concerning as their behavior. The majority of the stories were set in the United States, specifically in Malibu, and revolved around young, attractive people who committed heinous crimes. While only one novel, The Pepsi-Cola Addict, about a young teenager seduced by his high school teacher, made it to print, June and Jennifer Gibbons wrote a dozen other stories. After the book was printed, The silent twins became bored with simply writing about life outside their bedroom walls and yearned to see the world for themselves. By the age of 18, the girls had begun experimenting with drugs and alcohol, as well as committing petty crimes that progressed to arson and theft. Under the Mental Health Act of 1983, the couple was arrested and sentenced to indefinite detention. They were admitted to Broadmoor Hospital, a high-security mental health hospital. June and Jennifer Gibbons found it difficult to be hospitalized at Broadmoor Hospital. The girls' lifestyle was not tolerated as well by the high-security mental health facility as it had been by their school and family. Instead of allowing them to retreat into their own world, they were subjected to high doses of antipsychotic medications, which rendered them unable to concentrate. Jennifer apparently developed tardive dyskinesia, which is a neurological disorder resulting in involuntary, repetitive movements. Their medications had apparently been adjusted sufficiently for them to continue the copious diaries they had begun in 1980, and they were able to join the hospital choir, but they lost most of their interest in creative writing. The girls had been in the hospital for nearly 12 years, and their only escape was to fill page after page in diary after diary. Marjorie Wallace, a British journalist, was able to get the girls to open up to her about their confinement in the 1980s, which became an explosive case in local media. June once told Wallace, who wrote a biography about the twins in 1986, that one of them had to die for the other to live a normal life. According to reports, the twins were moved to a more open hospital environment in 1993 and appeared to be on their way to becoming self-sufficient. Finally, in March 1993, plans were made to transfer the twins to a lower security clinic in Wales. However, when Jennifer arrived at the new facility, doctors discovered she was unresponsive. She had apparently dozed off during the journey and would not awaken. Jennifer Gibbons died at 6:15 that evening after being taken to a nearby hospital due to a sudden inflammation of the heart. She was only 29 years old at that time. While acute myocarditis, a sudden inflammation of the heart, was thought to be the official cause of death, there was no evidence of poison or anything else unusual in her system, and her death remains a mystery. The doctors at the Caswell Clinic concluded that the medications given to the girls at Broadmoor must have stimulated Jennifer's immune system, despite the fact that June was given the same medications and was in perfect health when she arrived. Wallace claims that June told her that Jennifer wanted to be a sacrifice so that June could be more self-sufficient. Wallace, on the other hand, remembered visiting June several days after Jennifer's death and finding her in good spirits and willing to talk. Really sit down and talk for the first time. June appeared to be a different person after that. She explained to Wallace how Jennifer's death had liberated her for the first time. She explained how Jennifer had to die and how they had agreed that once she died, it would be June's responsibility to live for the other. And June did exactly that. June was soon released from the hospital and, by all accounts, resumed her normal life. June seemed to have lost interest in remaining silent once the two silent twins were reduced to one. Years later, she is still in the United Kingdom close to her family. She's reintegrated into society and speaks to anyone who will listen. A far cry from the girl who spent her childhood talking to no one but her sister. When asked why she and her sister had committed to remaining silent for nearly 30 years, June simply replied, "We made a pact. We said we weren't going to speak to anybody. We stopped talking altogether. Only us two in our bedroom upstairs." According to the most recent information, Jennifer Gibbons is still alive. She was living on her own in Wales by 2008. Greta, their sister, stated in an interview in 2016 that the hospital stay hastened Jennifer's death and that a family lawsuit was considered, but the family ultimately decided against it.
Hey everyone, I just wanted to say that I am incredibly grateful that you took time out of your schedule to listen to my narration. This is Nikki of Twysted Mind, wishing you a great rest of your day. Salamat.